This is Radiant Voices Media.
Hi, and welcome to the Jordan Kinda Knows Something show, where I'll be talking about health, fitness, life, and anything else I kinda know something about. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode. Now, if you are someone who likes to travel and may not be the most organized, or you're someone who wants to travel in the future more, when we can of course, then this episode is going to be for you. During this episode, I'm going to be talking with Roshan Sahu, someone who I am super envious of and has traveled to so many wonderful places, is super organized, and gives us some great tips on traveling. So let's get into this episode. All right. Hello, Roshan, and welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming, or I guess not coming, being on here on Zoom, because it's hard to see each other face to face, I guess, from the other side of the world.
Jordan, thanks so much for having me on the show. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, no worries. So maybe to get started, I mean, I know who you are because you're my cousin, of course, but maybe for the people listening, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself if you don't mind? Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, whatever you feel, really.
For sure. So thanks, Jordan, for having me on.
Yeah.
So as Jordan mentioned, my name is Roshan. Unlike Jordan, I'm not in Australia. I'm currently in my bedroom here in Toronto, Canada. A little bit about myself. I'm a data scientist by day. I am desperately trying to finish up my MBA in the evenings. This year did not go as planned, as I'm sure everyone's here, just because of the pandemic. So I have spent my summer trying to get outside as much as possible, things like golfing, hiking, and things like that. I am an avid traveler, which is what I'm very excited to chat with Jordan more about on the pod.
Yeah, so I know, I'm very envious of Roshan because he always, anytime I ask, he always has a trip planned, going somewhere, or he's already somewhere, and he's just been on so many different trips and places. Whereas me, I love traveling, but Roshan goes to pretty cool places, whereas me, I go to LA and spend 10 days in LA. You know what I mean? So I'm very envious of Roshan, and that's why I kind of wanted to have you on the podcast, because I was like, it's probably going to be it'll probably be interesting to learn planning techniques and things like that. I think everybody goes around traveling a little bit differently, and you seem like you plan things very well. So I thought, yeah, it would be cool to kind of get you on. So thank you for doing this. But maybe to start, maybe kind of go over some places that you've been to. Maybe even some favorite places, if you don't mind going over.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a very dynamic couple of years for me. A few years back now, my undergraduate degree was co-op. For those who aren't familiar with the term, I went to the University of Waterloo, and every 4 months you had to work. You and your cohort took a break from school, and it was part of the degree to find a job out and do something relevant, get some work experience, then come back. And I was really fortunate that the jobs that I got were in places I was really interested in. So at an age probably far too young, but when I was 19, I got to live in Alberta for 4 months. I got to live in a remote village in the Dominican Republic to volunteer for another 4 months in my undergrad. I did another one in Ottawa, also in Canada. And then after I was done my undergrad, I really explored traveling on my own and really just tried to go wherever I found interesting. In 2018, I was able to do a little bit of Western Europe. I was able to backpack through places like London, Paris, and Zurich. In 2019, I was able to do an eco tour through Costa Rica. So I found an organization and we backpacked through the jungle together and stayed in the jungle, and that was really fun. Most recently, before the pandemic hit, this was quite recently, this was in March, I was able to go to my cousin's wedding in India, and just to expand my horizons a little bit and stay somewhere that I hadn't stayed before, I took a few days to myself and visited both Amsterdam uh, and Brussels, and then kept traveling onwards to India. If the pandemic did not hit, I probably would have gone to Australia and New Zealand. And Jordan, I would have hung out with you for a day or two, but sadly, we cannot do that
Yeah.
for a little while. So, no travel plans for the foreseeable future. Sorry,
Yeah.
listeners.
Where's your favorite place been thus far? Because that was a lot. Like
That's a
you've
lot.
been a lot of places. Yeah.
Yeah. We all have that person on our Instagram who travels more than we do, or
Yeah.
seems to like have more money to spend. And I certainly have those people on my feed, and I'm really envious of them. So I'm really touched to hear that someone else is on my Instagram, and they're
Yeah.
like, where the
Yeah.
hell is this guy?
Not even that. Like I
Um,
know you have like a Flickr, or I think
I
it's Flickr,
do.
right? Yeah. And like I was looking last night, to be honest, in all the pictures, and I was like, wow, he's been a lot of places. And like the pictures are beautiful too. So it's like where, yeah, I wonder where, I mean, not necessarily a favorite, but is there places that stood out more so than others?
For sure. So I've got a couple of um, spots in my notes that I found very, very meaningful, often for very arbitrary reasons.
Mm.
So hopefully the listeners can might find these places interesting. Um, when I was really moved by traveling in Switzerland.
Okay.
I found Switzerland utopian. They have really restrictive gun laws, and they
Huh.
seem to care about the environment, and
Yeah.
everyone seems to make enough money. I'm not well versed in the history of Switzerland, but it was so cool just to hang out in a place that seems to have life just figured out a bit
Right.
and doesn't seem to struggle with the same things that we do in countries like Canada and the United States.
Yeah.
And in Switzerland, the physical t- topology, just the mountains and the water, was so beautiful. It's hard to put it into words. Maybe Jordan, we can put my Flickr in the show notes, and then
Yeah,
folks
for
can go
sure.
and see
Yeah.
some of my pictures. I'm not a super religious, spiritual person, but when I was in Switzerland, I thought, I hope that, this is like, if there is some kind of afterlife, this is where I would like to hang out. This is
Yeah.
just so beautiful. So favorite place, 1 out of 3, is definitely Switzerland.
Right.
Uh, the second place is San Francisco in
Okay.
California. I was able to live there as a kid very briefly, and I was able to travel back there this past year. Um, San Francisco, I find, is a very smart and liberal and cool place to hang out. There's a particular park called Dolores Park where I met some friends, and people in this park were nice to each other, and we were drinking wine, and people were playing with each other's dogs.
Wow.
And it was just really, really special to feel safe and feel loved in this in Dolores Park in San Francisco.
Hmm.
That was a place too. The third place, a bit closer to home for you, because I know you're a van boy
Yeah.
at heart, a Van City guy,
Yeah.
is Banff, Alberta.
Okay.
Banff, Alberta is incredibly beautiful mountains. I guess you're no stranger to mountains either.
Hmm.
Banff, Alberta is kind of wonderful because it's very accessible. Canada, I find, is a very welcoming place.
Hmm.
It's easy to visit. The park costs like $10,
Yeah.
10 Canadian dollars to get into. And it's just so beautiful. And by luck and by a bit of chance, a friend and I were able to stay in the Fairmont Hotel in
Oh,
Banff.
wow. Wow.
I was 19. I had no place hanging around the Fairmont. I wouldn't have been upset if they asked me to leave. But in the middle of mountains and trees covered in snow, there's this 5-star hotel, and I have wonderful memories with my friend at the time, walking through the hotel, and it was like the 1930s. It was like a scene in Titanic, people playing the cello and the violin, and people dressed up and having fancy cocktails. And I just thought myself thinking, it would be a real privilege to take a loved one here, or to ask someone to marry me here,
Yeah.
or to just to come back here.
Wow.
So yeah, Banff, Alberta is my
Okay.
third favorite place in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been to Banff too, but I think I was so young when I went there and like we were there for a day. So I don't think, at that age I appreciated it that much. Whereas now looking back, it's like, okay, could have spent more time there, could have like appreciated the beauty a little bit more. Cause I look at pictures now for me and I'm like, oh, that was a nice place. I should have appreciated a little bit more. But I'm interested. Like, I really like the Switzerland one because I kind
Mm.
of find the same thing here in Australia. Like compared to North America, they're they're a lot more, I guess, a lot more involved with the environment, and they're a lot more open about those things and progressive, and they pay better wages. Even though Australians like to complain about the low pay, but like I think minimum wage here is like 22 bucks or whatever,
Mm.
whereas out in Vancouver I think it rose like $14 or something like last year. So
Just like
um
two coffees at Starbucks for
yeah.
those who've been
Yeah,
to Canada before.
basically, yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. I've always wanted to go to Switzerland, so
Mhm.
that was cool there. But what I guess like going to your planning, what's
Mhm.
kind of the first thing that you do when you want to go somewhere? Like, do you always have the places listed? Do you have like a bucket list, or how do you choose essentially where you want to go?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate, and I suspect that privilege and autonomy will be
Hmm.
a thing that continues to come up in our conversation.
Yeah.
I know the folks listening to this can't see me, but just for the record, I am a straight cisgendered male, and with access to a phone and a credit card,
Hmm.
and I feel safe and I
Yeah.
feel comfortable walking through the world.
Right.
I feel very comfortable traveling to a city that I haven't been before, or walking around with earphones, being out late, and getting in a cab. And I totally understand that people's travel will vary based on their circumstance. Perhaps
Right.
if you're a person of color or a trans person,
Yeah.
your travel plans might look different than mine. Yeah, I can definitely dive into these. Kind of the biggest decision that one needs to make is, kind of the beginning of the logic path. Is this a trip on my own, or is this trip with other people?
Right. Okay.
Um, I think that kind of starts to decide the rest of your methodology. In terms of where to go, um, I think that was the first thing you asked me. I try to do places I haven't done before.
Okay.
I kind of want to knock off as many countries as I can
Yeah.
and just be able to look at a globe, look at a map, and think of all the memories I've made in all those places. I've got friends and family who that is not their thing.
Hmm.
I have that one uncle who's like, I love Mexico, like I love my resort, like I go
Yeah.
every
You
year
go over
with the
here.
same
Yeah.
buddies, and I golf, and I'm like, that's awesome travel, uncle. But like that is not for me.
That's like me in LA. I'll go there every
Yeah,
year if I could.
yeah.
Yeah.
What is it about LA that keeps you
I
coming
just like
back?
I just like the vibe of California. Like I like walking down the street and they have all of the like bougie things that I like, You can go
Mm,
wake up in the morning, walk down the beach, or if I'm staying in Hollywood, you can walk down Hollywood and like they have Trader Joe's and Whole Foods all the time. And I love me a good Whole Foods or Trader Joe's meal.
mm.
Like smoothie bowls and acai bowls and like all of those like things that classic, like when you think of LA, it's very me. So
S- You are definitely, for those people who haven't perused through Jordan's Instagram, he is like an incredibly handsome young man. And to your credit, like you work for your fitness, like you work for your body.
yeah.
So I very much see you just like running through LA, like taking some nice
Yeah,
Instagrams, like
basically.
just
Just do
living
it
your
for the
best life.
gram.
Like
That's exactly
I
it. And that's
like,
why
yeah,
too.
I
There's
can
so
see you
many
liking
photo
LA
opportunities
photos.
there.
Me,
Yeah.
I'd be like, I feel like a troll. Everyone else is so pretty.
Yeah. But okay, a little sidetrack there, but yeah.
Yes.
So what else do you do?
Yeah. So once you've kind of narrowed down, will this trip be with other people? Will this be by myself? You've picked your location, so then you can go from there.
Right.
The next thing I would do, which might sound intuitive, is book the time off of work or school.
Yeah.
I would ask your team lead, I would ask your thesis advisor, is this cool? And just kind of book your days off. And that's just another perimeter that's nailed down.
Hmm.
Your trip to Vancouver or LA will look very different if it's 4 days or 14 days.
Right.
And then you can do that. I would do some research. I love to research, and this might be another decision point where me and the listener vary.
Yeah.
If you are 21 and you just finished your undergrad, you might just want to go and make no plans. That's absolutely fine. Me, I love to plan, I love to read, I love to do research. So I research as much as I can. And I think there's multiple purposes to the research. Maybe there's not only things I can find out that I would like to do or like to see, maybe you can learn something about the culture that you're going to. Perhaps in one culture, it would be quite rude to shake someone's hand,
Hmm.
or to bow, or to
Yeah.
not bow, or there's just so many social cultural norms that are going to be different based on where you go.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll look up if you should wear shoes in the person's house where you're going, because I imagine that will
Yeah,
differ
that's the thing here in
from
Australia. They
place.
wear shoes inside,
Really? I didn't know
which is
that.
so different. So yeah, look that up.
Why?
Look that up.
I
I have to
didn't know that.
vacuum every day.
Uh, I grew up with like very American TV shows, and in a TV show like Arthur, they wore shoes inside,
Inside,
and me and
yeah.
my Canadian sisters would be like, why, like, why would you wear shoes
Yeah.
inside? Once you've done some research and you know what you want to do, I would book things. I would put the credit card number down on things that you have to do and on things that won't change. So
Mm,
when I say things that are not flexible, things like your flights,
right.
these flights will probably not change. Let's have that arrival and the departure time in your calendar now.
Hmm.
There's also some things that I think on your trip you cannot and should not move.
Right.
For example, when I was traveling to London a few years back, I wanted to see a show. There was only one night where I could get a ticket to the show. The rest of my day had to be planned around this night where I had this ticket that could not be moved. So I would book those in advance as well.
Right.
Um, I would get in touch with your friends and family. I know that I had done this with you. You probably thought I was a little off my rocker. I would message your friends and family and see if there's anyone you want to meet along the way,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and see if they have a day free. And if they're only free one day of your trip, then that is also something that you can book in the calendar and you can plan around. So then, after you've booked and paid for those things that you can't move, you can start to book and plan things that are a little bit more flexible.
Hmm.
I do want to come back and talk more in depth about Airbnb experiences,
Oh yeah,
but I
absolutely.
find that they are incredibly flexible with Airbnb stays as well. So I do think it's good to book some of those, but things that you can also say no to later, plans
Right.
change. Um, and that's pretty much it. I know for
Right.
myself, we could go into the nuances of this more.
Yeah.
Um, I like to, I love to plan things. I also love to just be in the moment and explore and learn as well. What
Yeah.
seems to work well for me now is leaving some unstructured time.
Mm,
And if you do an Airbnb experience from 9 to 1 a.m., you're meeting your friend for dinner in the evening.
right.
If you leave a few hours in the middle, you have some time to go back to that coffee or donut place you saw on your walk in the morning.
Right.
You have some time to do some shopping for your boyfriend or girlfriend if you saw something that they would like. You have some time to take a nap. You have time to go out and take some pictures. Yeah, so I recommend a balance
Right.
of structured and unstructured time, and
Right.
that's kind of my methodology for organizing a trip.
Okay, cool. So I know you mentioned like traveling alone versus with others is one thing that you kind of have to pay attention with first, right? What do you prefer? Do you prefer traveling
Oh,
alone or
that's a
you
good
do prefer
question.
traveling with others? Because I know what
Okay.
I prefer, but I want to
Okay,
know
I
what
want to get to
you.
that because I want to hear it.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I don't know how good of a job I did. I tried to like listen to people, particularly elders, when they would speak to me. I know that's a cultural thing as well. But a lot of caring adults in my life would kind of look at me and say, I wish I traveled alone.
Mm,
My mom got married at like 23. Like
right.
she never traveled alone.
Yeah.
So I knew that in my 20s, that was something I wanted to do in that kind of vibe with my personality and my need to control things. So the majority of my travels for the first half of my 20s now were on my own. Um,
Hmm.
Trips like going to Western Europe, to Costa Rica, to all over the States, to a bit of Asia this year. Those were mostly on my own, and I really, really enjoyed it. I think there are so many perks when it comes to traveling on your own, and I encourage the listener to think critically about it if it's something you haven't done.
Hmm.
Um, you'll get to have a lot of autonomy over your travels. If you're a photographer like me, you want to get up at 5 a.m. to go to take a picture of this one building in Paris, you can do it. You'll so I think you'll be able to have some fun and have some autonomy that way. I think traveling alone pushes you in a way that we don't often think. Um, when you're traveling alone and you go to a bar or you show up to a pub crawl with Airbnb, you have to show up. You
Yeah.
don't have a friend to shoulder to lean on.
Yeah.
You have to be brave and say, my name's Roshan. I'm from this place. I'm about this old. Tell me about your world and why you're here.
Right.
So you kind of have to boss up that way. There are some cons. Traveling on your own can be expensive
Yeah.
because when you pay the hotel bill, like there's like no one to split it with. It's just like fine, like
Yeah.
take my credit card. I hope it goes through. um, I think so. To your question, I have loved traveling on my own. I think I will always do it in some capacity.
Hmm.
I think the latter half of my 20s will be some kind of hybrid. Will be
Right.
some
Okay.
kind of hybrid model.
Yeah.
It'll be traveling with friends and family or meeting people along the way
Yeah.
and saying, let's meet in the middle. So I know that I keep mentioning that I'm a photographer.
Yeah.
And as a photographer, I wander around a city that probably makes no sense to people who don't love to take pictures.
Right.
I often have to take transit, I have to wait in lines, I have to climb stairs to get the shot that I want. If I, for example, of this hybrid model, if I was meeting up with you in Australia in your village, I might say, hey, Jordan, I've researched some of the things I want to take pictures of. Why don't I get those shots done in the day? I know you have to work anyways. Let's meet up for dinner and drinks in the evening,
Yeah.
and then you kind of get the best of both worlds that day.
Right, right. And I guess you could do that too, like if you're traveling with someone too, like not necessarily meeting them. I guess like if you're traveling with someone and oh, I wanna go do this, but maybe the morning time is the best time to do or go take a shot, then I guess you can always just not necessarily ditch that person, but like just say, okay, I'm gonna wake up at 6 a.m. Why don't we, after I do this, have lunch or
Hmm.
whatnot? Like it doesn't need to be when you're traveling with someone, I don't think you need to be like two peas in a pod 24/7. At least that's my rationale because I mean, I know I said I know how I like to travel, and that's alone. Like I like to travel alone,
Hmm.
but that's just because I don't like to compromise. I don't like to do what other people want to do. I'm very much like that. I just want me, me, me. Um, so yeah, like it's interesting there how like you can kind of do different things even if you're traveling with someone. So yeah, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
But one thing that I wanted to kind of go into is flights. So
Mm.
flights, I know like some people think, oh, you should book flights. I've heard people tell me, oh, book flights, like wait until they get cheaper and cheaper. But sometimes they get more expensive. Whereas some people are like, okay, book it out in advance or far out advance when you get that deal. So like, how do you go about booking flights?
Sure. So, just some tips. So, I'm a data scientist, so I think about data and algorithms a fair bit.
Okay.
Flight prices are dynamic,
Yeah.
so they might change from the time of day, from one date you look at them to another.
Hmm.
Um, so when you are booking flights, I would try to clear your browser history, clear your cookies.
Hmm.
If an airline gets any digital trace that this is a flight that you really want, the flight
Yeah.
might go up a little bit. Or I
Okay.
would try to do all your looking on one device, and then when you actually go to book, you can use a different device. That's just
Huh.
a little tip.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah,
Always
yeah,
watching you.
flights. Yeah, always. Um, I am a big advocate of booking flights way in advance.
Right.
And
Okay.
some listeners might be very upset. They might be going to like send me an angry email,
Yeah.
but I will. I'm a fan of booking flights in advance because it gets you to put some skin in the game.
Huh.
If you booked your flights a year out,
Hmm.
you know the trip is happening. You know there's no going back.
Right.
You can't get a few months close to the trip, and work can get super busy, or you might get really tired, or your financial situation might be a little bit different.
Hmm.
If you book your flights, you know the trip is happening,
Right.
and I think it gets you a little bit more invested once you have that booking confirmation in your email, and you know
Right.
this flight is happening. I was just listening to a book yesterday that delved into some psychology, and it talked about how being excited for something makes us often as happy or perhaps even more happy than the actual thing itself.
Oh,
Jordan, I don't know if you went to your prom back in high school.
I did.
Um,
We didn't have one.
Weird.
Oh yeah, no, 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 we did. Yeah, on graduation day. Yeah, yeah, I went.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I was like bad at prom. That's not just me. Like I've got like data to back that up. Like I was not good at
Right.
prom, but if you remember, getting ready for prom was actually more fun than high school prom itself.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna
Yeah.
go. Yeah, so.
Okay. So if you book this flight in advance,
Yeah.
your brain has 6 months worth of being excited just
Huh.
before the actual trip itself, and that doses of happiness is actually can be really good for us.
Yeah. And I think that's just for me, that's a testimony of how like I'm very last minute too. Because my prom, I wasn't gonna go to my prom, but like
No.
no, I was at graduation and I think it was like all of my friends were like, oh, well, you should come, blah, blah, blah. And I think it was like last minute. So my parents had to drive like all of my clothes out and stuff. And then I
Oh
had
my
to change
gosh.
and then go. And then it was the after party too. I wasn't going to go to the after party. I was just going to like go home at 8:30 or whatnot. But yeah, so I'm kind of the opposite in the sense where like, if it's a trip that I'm really excited for, like, yeah, I'll book it out advance. But a lot of my plans are very last minute, and that's just the type of person that I am. I remember when I was in Hawaii, or when I went to Hawaii for 3 weeks, like that was a very last minute thing. Our other cousin was the one who like asked me, oh, do you want to go? We're going to go in like a month. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, let's try to get work off, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't a small trip. It was like 3.5 weeks too. Um, but yeah, no, I like that. I agree. You should plan as far advance, but um, I'm just not organized. I'm not an organized person.
Well, the flights is probably the biggest thing I recommend booking out.
Yeah.
I am definitely up for saying yes and being open and curious. And I imagine on a trip like your Hawaii trip, you met some interesting strangers along the way,
Yeah.
and you had some time and space and some flexibility to say, "Yes, I will explore." You were working on a farm, I
Yes.
heard.
Yeah.
So yes, perhaps I want to see your farm as well.
Yeah.
Like, come to our farm. Like, oh, like this bar that I haven't been to. Sure, let's go. So,
Yeah.
so I definitely recommend being
Yeah,
flexible as
and that's
well.
the thing too. Like a lot of my trips or the trips that I've been on, like the Hawaii trip was on the big island of Hawaii. So like it was an island, not like Honolulu or anything like that, where you go to Honolulu and apparently I've never been there, but apparently it's like any other state in the US now. Whereas the big island, like their city was just kind of where, or their type of city was just kind of where the cruise ship docked. So it was a bunch of like random like t-shirt shops and things like that and restaurants, and that was it. And then they had like a random Walmart on the island and things like that, but it was very like a low-key type of thing. And yeah, staying on the farm, there was a person from Australia actually, from Budapest, from America or California. So you get to meet a lot of people. And I think that kind of goes into what I want to talk about next was, do you ever stay or have you ever looked into hostels? Because I stay in
Oh
hostels anytime
yes.
that I
Oh, I
go
have
somewhere.
so much to say about
Okay.
hostels.
Okay.
Okay. So for the listeners who haven't stayed in a hostel or are familiar with the concept, hostels are like hotels, but they're not. They're often lower budget. There are less amenities than a hotel, a little bit more informal, and a little bit cheaper. And I think it's part of the culture of a hostel to be open, to interact with other travelers. Perhaps you stay longer term. You can do some of your own cooking. And it's just a different vibe. So I definitely recommend checking out a hostel if you haven't already. I have really enjoyed and sometimes struggled with my experience with hostels.
Mm,
I think hostels can be great to do what we've mentioned, to meet other people, to save some money and broaden your horizons and things like that. I think they challenge you. They challenge you to be open and to build trust with people who you haven't even met.
right.
An example, when I was staying in Switzerland, I had stayed in Airbnbs throughout my entire trip.
Mhm.
And it was my last night of the trip. And I thought, I'm going to stay in a hostel.
Okay.
I'm in Europe, I'm young, I need to say that I've done this.
Yeah.
And it was me and three other guys in the room the size of a closet.
Right.
And I think one guy was from the UK, one was from Australia, one was from the States. And no one was aggressive or rude, and everyone was nice.
Yeah.
No one was super interested in each other. Everyone was just kind of tired from their own travels that day. They had things that they had to be up for the next day. And sleeping in a room with strangers is quite something.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really glad I did that, and it was overall a good experience. I do have some tips for staying and booking hostels in the future.
Yeah,
Is it okay
for
if I share
sure.
those?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. So if you think a hostel might be right for you,
Yeah.
um, I want the listener to be aware that there are multiple types of rooms.
Okay.
So when I just talked about staying in Switzerland, that was a very specific type of room, me in a room with three other people. I have stayed in hostel rooms where it is just you, so perhaps you might feel safer that way, or just you and one other person. So just know that some of those options are available to you. There are sites online that are just for booking these hostels. I would check out hostelworld.com. That's where I
Okay.
booked all of my hostels. There are hostels in there from all around the world. It's fairly easy to book and to pay and to pick your room type and where you're staying. Hostels often have ratings. I'm
Right.
curious to see if, Jordan, you ever looked into these ratings when you're considering where to stay. I
Yes.
would really trust these ratings.
Okay. Yeah.
I find them a really accurate depiction
Mm-hmm.
of the cleanliness and the overall quality of your stay.
Yeah.
When I was in Costa Rica, I was a little bit low on cash, and I thought, I was already there. I'm like, maybe I can just stay in a lower star hostel this night, just maybe save like $20 or something.
Yeah.
And it was not worth it. People were smoking outside, and the water didn't work, and the bathroom was dirty, and there were bugs on the floor, and I didn't sleep as well. And I thought, okay, I should have a 4.7 on Hostel World
Yeah.
was significantly different than a
Right.
3.7 on
Yeah.
Hostel World. Did you ever use those ratings during any of your
Yeah,
stays
so
for
I'm the
this?
same. I use Hostel World all the time, anytime I do hostels. And I don't think I've ever stayed at a place lower than like a 4.3-ish. I try to stay
4.3.
in the fours. So they're all out of five, I believe. And I try to stay in the four range. And I find like even if you compare like a 3.7, like if you're someone who is short on cash or whatnot,
Mm,
like sometimes the 3.7 versus like the 4.7 isn't so much of a difference on cash.
yeah.
Sometimes it's significantly more, but for the most part, like you can find a decent hostel for cheap. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Stay at somewhere that's a little bit higher ratings. And you also like get little perks sometimes. Like sometimes they do give you breakfast and just the cleanliness
Mhm.
too. Like it's nicer. The room sizes sometimes are like bigger or there's smaller beds in them. So like instead of a 12-person, I guess, room, there's like a 6-person room or something like that. So yeah, I agree with that, the ratings. But I've personally actually had good experiences with hostels, which is why I
Hmm.
kind of continue using them, which is maybe because I stay in the like four plus region mark. But you can definitely like when I was in my last trip to California again, I think I stayed in 3 different hostels. I stayed in one in Hollywood, one downtown LA, and then one in Venice area. And like you could tell the difference between all of them. I think their ratings all of their ratings was like a 4.5, but you could definitely tell the difference between all three. Like the one in Hollywood was very much your classic hostel. Like I think it was a 10-person bedroom. Um, I think it was like a unisex bedroom. It had like a bathroom and whatnot in there, and it was relatively clean, but it was nothing special. Whereas I remember when I stayed downtown LA, it was the exact same rating, but it was called, I think, the Freehand Hotel. And like the first 2 floors were like hostel type floors, and then the rest of the floors were like a hotel, actual hotel.
Hmm.
And it was like, it ended up being like the place to be because they had like a rooftop bar and pool. And like in the evening, the line was like down the road just to get in. So it was a good decision. But even though it was a 4.5 compared to the Hollywood one, I think it was like $120 for like per night. And that one that I stayed downtown LA, whereas the Hollywood one was like $30 per night, like a normal
Wow.
hostel fee. So I guess definitely the area too, I would assume, would play a
Hmm.
factor on the price and like what you're getting. But yeah, I really like hostels. I've had good experiences, and you meet people like from other places of the world. And like you were saying before, you don't necessarily, I guess, you don't necessarily have to chat with them all the time or whatnot. Like people are basically doing their own thing. But um, I've had some good experiences. Like when I was in LA, I got like free tickets to Ariana Grande, or a ticket to Ariana Grande concert, because one of my whoever I was staying with, she had like an extra ticket. And I
Wow.
was like, I remember I was in the hostel room, like on the couch looking for tickets, because I remember her concert was like two, two blocks down, and I had no clue. So I was like, oh my God, maybe I could get last minute tickets, but it was sold out. And she just mentioned, she was like, oh yeah, I have an extra ticket because her grandma gave her a ticket, but then she wanted a better one. So she brought her own. So anyways, I got a free Ariana Grande ticket, which
That's so
was like a
cool.
front row. Like I sat right behind like her brother and her mother and like all of Ariana Grande's posse. So yeah, like you can get some pretty good experiences from
Yeah.
hostel. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, what about trip excursions? So
Excursions.
do you plan everything out in advance, or do you kind of go with the flow when you're on the
Hmm.
trip?
Yeah, I've got lots to say about trip excursions. One very broad tip I have for the listener
Yeah,
is whatever you can pay for in advance, try to pay for it in advance.
right.
When I went to the Eiffel Tower in Paris, I was able to use a very generic service like Expedia to
Hmm.
book my ticket to go up the Eiffel Tower in advance.
Hmm.
And I got to the Eiffel Tower one day. It was pretty warm. I had this big backpack on. and there was this huge line, like a 2 to 3 hour line, and I
Yeah.
started to stand in it. Um, and someone mentioned to me, like, "Oh, are you? Do you need to buy a ticket?" I said, "No, I have mine." And they said, "Your line's that shorter one over there. This line's
Huh.
for people who just need to buy the tickets."
Huh.
And it saved me hours. It saved me
Wow.
like 2 to 3 hours when I didn't have that long in the city to see the most visited tourist attraction in the world.
Yeah.
So I know that Visa bill is going to hurt. I know TD Bank or whoever you use is going to charge you that conversion rate. I promise you that if you can swing it, it will save you time
Mm-hmm.
and it might save you a hassle.
Right.
Um, and if you save an hour every day for 7 days of your trip, that is going
Mm-hmm.
to add up.
Right.
Tips for excursions. I try to book the big money excursions that I know that I want to see, that I
Okay.
can't compromise on.
Yeah.
I know that, in Paris, that Eiffel Tower ticket was big money. I
Mm-hmm.
was not going to leave Paris without getting that
Right.
ticket.
Right.
The I recommend maybe leaving some of the tickets off that are a bit lower in price
Yeah.
and lower in demand because there
Okay.
might be some nuances along the way that might make that ticket a little bit cheaper
Yeah.
or change things.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to the Shard Tower in London, the Shard Tower in London is super tall. It's a great vantage point for any photographer in London to get their shot in. And I got to the front desk, and it didn't say this on their website, but on this big sign behind the ticket guy, it said student price. I'm like,
Okay.
well, I'm a student. Like, I'm a
Yeah.
student, right? Like, yeah. So then I talked to the gentleman.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, like, do you have, like a student card on you or something? I'm like, no, like, I'm from Canada, but I am a student. And he was really cool.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe you could show me like an email from your student account, and like
Yeah.
then I know you're a student, and like
Yeah.
of course, like I'll give you the price. And it totally worked. And I saved
Oh.
like €5, which is like a sandwich or like a
Yeah.
coffee in London. And I was really glad that I didn't book that ticket in advance. There's no way that I would have known about a student price. So
Right.
there can be things like that along the way.
Right.
I recommend another very blanket recommendation is try to stay away from the biggest, most conventional tourist attractions in that city.
I was just gonna say,
Um,
yeah, or I was just gonna ask that. Yeah.
I would stay away from the sorry, not the Eiffel Tower, see the Eiffel Tower. I would stay away from the Empire State Building in
Right.
New York.
Right.
Um, it's been photographed to death. It's been documented to death.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would see or notice anything in the Eiffel Tower that thousands and thousands of people have not seen
Yeah.
or experienced.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in a bar in Brooklyn
Okay.
that real New Yorkers actually go to,
Yeah.
and learning about what a real New Yorker does and
Right.
thinks and feels.
Yeah.
So I recommend looking for lower key spots that are maybe less expensive, um, where you can have an experience that connects you more to the place that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So I challenge the listener to do some research and find some of those spots.
Right.
I think a very underrated way to have experiences when you're traveling is something called Airbnb experiences.
Okay.
When we think of Airbnb, we think of using the service to pay to stay in someone else's home when
Yeah.
we're traveling.
Mm-hmm.
In the past few years, Airbnb has expanded its offerings,
Mm-hmm.
and Airbnb is a hub for local people in their city to offer some kind of experience. So
Okay.
you could go on a history walk, you
Yeah.
could go on a photography tour, you
Yeah.
could work out with a local CrossFit instructor.
Yeah.
It's a great way to learn from a local in that city.
Right.
These experiences are often very affordable.
Yeah.
They're offered very often,
Mm-hmm.
and it's often not just you and the guide. There are other people who are doing this experience with you.
Mm-hmm.
So you not only get to learn from an instructor, learn from a guide, feel more connected to the place that you're in, but meet some fellow travelers along the way.
Hmm.
Some of the experiences that I did that I never would have found these places if it was just me. I went on a history walk in London. I walked through a village in India with a local photographer. Um, I did a bar crawl in San Francisco.
Hmm.
So these were experiences that helped me to learn about wherever I was.
Right. Okay. That's a good tip. And if anybody's like me and travels alone but needs somebody to take pictures for their Instagram, that's probably a
Yeah,
good tip there.
yeah. It's also a great way to feel safe. And if
Yeah.
you are traveling alone, like you like to do, like I really like to do, it's a great way to get some social time in.
Right.
Um, when I've traveled alone, I'm curious to hear about you.
Yeah.
I might have on my trips, I try to do some kind of Airbnb experience every day.
Hmm.
So it didn't really feel like I was traveling alone. I had talked to five new people each day.
Right.
So it was
Right.
kind of like I was traveling with friends. I just didn't know who the friends were yet.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've never heard of that Airbnb thing, but that's good to know for other trips because I don't even think I've stayed in one Airbnb before in Hawaii, but I've never really used the service. But no, I agree. I think it's a good way to meet new people and whatnot. And I like how you said before of how like you'd much rather see like a bar where like people kind of get the actual culture of the place. You know what I mean? Opposed to like the touristy type places. I don't really I don't really like the touristy type stuff too. I'll go and see it if it's super like when I was in Hollywood, I wanted to see the Star Walk or like the whatever that strip is just to kind of see it and just to kind of, but like for me, after 5 minutes, I was like, okay, I'm done with this. Like there's only so many stars you can see. It was jam packed. There was people everywhere. It wasn't for me. So like, yeah, I'd much rather like go to another part of the city that maybe is a little bit quieter, that has like some good restaurants, maybe yeah, a good bar here and there and meet new people. And I think like I remember for me, coffee shops are my favorite thing. And it's one thing
Interesting.
that I miss. Here in Australia, coffee shops are a lot different. But in LA, for example, it was very similar to Vancouver, where the coffee culture was very big. And you could spend hours in a coffee shop just working, doing your thing, like having your cup of coffee. And it was just kind of the norm there. Um, so that was actually a place where I met a few people when I was in Venice, because I was at a coffee shop and I went to the same one every day for like my 3 days there and just kind of working on my blog, doing things and emailing family or texting family and whatnot. Um, and everybody was so friendly. Like people would ask, oh, what you're doing. Everybody kind of wanted breaks of what they were working on, right? Of course. So like every hour or so, people would just kind of just start chatting to one another. So that was kind of that was a kind of way for me to, I guess, meet people and socialize that one time per day, as well as kind of get the culture and kind of learn new things. Like I learned about um, different places of Venice that I should check out. I learned about places of California that I should check out, and like, oh, make sure that you go down this route and not that route because LA traffic is really bad. So you kind of learn little tips and tricks, and again meet people. So that's that was a good thing there. Yeah. Um,
Mhm.
but what about safety measures? What do you do for like
Safety.
safety? Yeah. Or do
Yeah.
you
So,
plan anything or do you prepare anyway?
yeah. Yeah, I definitely do. To your point about coffee shop, that's really cool. I did not
Yeah.
think of coffee shops in the same way that you did.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
I love like just having your coffee and just having somewhere where you can like do your work, you know what I mean? And kind
mhm.
of, yeah, just kind of chill out throughout the day and spend like a couple hours doing it. And I love coffee too. I like different blends and things like that. So that's another part of it. But yeah, it was just that was a very big culture there. And that's super like Vancouver. If you go downtown Vancouver, all of the coffee shops are similar to there. You'll like walk in, you'll sit next to a person, and then like 5 hours later, they'll still be there. So it's just, yeah, it's something that's one thing to North America that I miss, because here in Australia, it's not like that at all, or in South Australia at least. But yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, safety. I definitely want all of your listeners to be safe.
Yeah.
I want everyone to feel comfortable, because if we're not comfortable, then we're not going to laugh or play or be ourselves or meet other people. If we're not safe and we're not comfortable, then really none of this other stuff is important. I encourage people to find something that works for you and to try to be aware of other people's needs. If you're someone with a heck of a lot of privilege like me, that's something that we can be aware of. And at the end of the bar crawl, we could turn to the rest of our group and say, I'm walking this way. Does anyone want to walk with me?
Yeah.
It's such an easy thing to do that doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
But someone else in the group might feel a lot more comfortable to walk home with me or to walk home in the group. We can try and meet people where they are. When I was an undergrad at the University of Waterloo, I don't know if the school still does this, but before you went anywhere for co-op, even just me going on my first one to Alberta, the school sent you this big long email about how to be safe. Okay. I assume that they didn't want any liability. They didn't want any CBC headlines.
Yeah.
Roshan didn't get back from Calgary. But there were some really easy things that they recommended. And I still do this. So for every trip, I take a photocopy of my passport.
Right.
I keep a paper copy with me, and I leave a paper copy at home.
Okay.
If I ever lost my passport,
yeah,
I had to take a cab to the Canadian embassy somewhere, I imagine it might help the process along if I show them a picture of my passport.
Right. Yeah.
I imagine having that passport number, a picture of me, would help that Canadian embassy to help me find a safe way to get home.
Yeah.
So I would have paper copies of your most important documents, and wherever home is for you, leave a copy back home. I always print out a entire copy of my whole itinerary. So when I say itinerary, I mean where I'm staying, any experiences that I'm doing, tickets to take a bus ride through the mountains in Zurich, or walking through a village in India. These are all things that I can print out as to who's hosting the experience, where in the world am I going to be going, and at what time.
Yeah.
So after I print all of that itinerary out, I keep a paper copy with me. I leave one at home. I keep one with me because I know we love phones. I love my phone. It's right here. Phones die.
Right.
So if you are it's ever 8 p.m., maybe not 8 p.m., 11 p.m., and you've had a few drinks, I know that I've definitely been there, and your phone dies, you have a paper copy of the address of what hostel you're staying in.
Right.
You can get in a cab and you can say, take me here. You don't have to find somewhere to charge your phone, and then hopefully you get home safely. Having that paper copy at home, I really recommend, because a loved one, your spouse, your kid, your parent, can keep tabs on where you are that day. So Jordan, I imagine when you were in LA, sounds like you sent your parents an email every so often. Let's say your parents, who I love, they're actually super sweet. If they didn't get an email from me on day 5, I thought, okay, it doesn't sound like this happened, but God forbid, they had to call the LA County police or something. At least they could tell a police officer in Venice that, our son was set to stay here, and these are 3 things that he was doing. I imagine that police officer in Venice, that could help them. So,
and if you have parents like me, they'll probably text you every day anyway. So if you don't hear a response, then
yes. So I would do all of that. I would find a quick and free way to check in with people that you care about.
Right.
I made it very clear to my parents, I'm going to Europe. I'm going to Costa Rica. I'm not going to call you. I'm not spending any Rogers $7 a day roam like home. No.
Yeah.
I recommend a WhatsApp. because WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, we've got all of these messaging apps that are free.
Yeah.
I recommend a quick message at the end of every day. I'm here. This is where I am. I'm good. No, no worries.
Yeah.
I find if you do that, your spouse or your parents are less likely to call you at a time that's inconvenient for you. So I would just take control of that message.
Yeah.
So there's already a few different things there.
Okay.
I've got lots of tips about interacting with strangers
Okay.
and how you can feel comfortable and how maybe you can make the other person feel comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah. So let's start with making ourselves feel comfortable.
Okay.
So I am a big advocate of talking to strangers.
Mm-hmm.
I think your success as an adult is kind of loosely correlated to how good you are at talking to strangers.
Right.
I recommend talking to all the ones that you want.
Yeah.
Try to keep your conversations in a public place.
Okay.
Not a car.
Yeah.
A bar.
Yeah.
Don't get anyone's car.
Don't get in your car, people.
A bar, a coffee shop, a park, even a nightclub where there's other people around.
Yeah.
God forbid these people could act as witnesses.
Yeah.
They, you know, us, your peer in the club maybe would notice if you were uncomfortable or you weren't feeling safe.
Mm-hmm.
If you are young and fun and you meet someone that you're interested in or might be interested in you, I've been there.
Yeah.
And it is dark and you've had a few drinks and it is late. I recommend, if you're up for it, framing it like this, it was so nice to meet you. I know we're both here for a few more days. Why don't I take your number and we meet up for breakfast in the morning?
Right.
Maybe then you can avoid going somewhere you don't know or again, getting out of that public space. So if you're up for that.
Yeah.
I've also got tips on how to make other people feel comfortable along the way.
Okay.
Yeah, again, big advocate of talking to strangers.
Yeah.
I think there are systems we can put in place to make the other person feel more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
As a photographer, I actually try and ask people if they can be in my shot, if they're comfortable with me taking a picture of them.
Okay.
So when I'm traveling, I keep a couple of cards in my pocket with my name and my email address.
Right.
So then if a person allows me to take a picture, I can give them a card.
Yeah.
And say, if you would like a copy of the picture of you in it, send me an email. I'm very happy to send you the picture that I took of you.
Right.
If you're like me and you've had great nights of drinking with strangers in Brussels or walking with them in Seattle, you might want to keep in touch with them.
Right.
But they might not want to keep in touch with you.
Yeah.
Or if you're a man like me and you're interested in women, the young woman might be perfectly happy being nice to you, but maybe she does not want to see you the next day.
Right.
Or keep in touch with you.
Mm-hmm.
The line that works for me is on the last day of my trip, or when I'm fairly confident I won't see the person again, is I give the person my card, that same simple business card with my name and my email.
Yeah.
It was so nice to meet you.
Yeah.
If you'd like to keep in touch, you can email me.
Mm-hmm.
You can email me. And if you're ever in my city, I would be very happy to see you again, to take you out for dinner and learn what life is like for you now.
Right.
And then at least if that person wants to see you again, they've got your email.
Right.
If they don't, they never have to send you an email if they don't want to.
Yeah.
So you've kind of given all the power to them.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
Yeah,
that's a very mature thing to do,
easy.
right? Yeah. Don't ghost them like me, people. Don't just never talk to them again after that one night. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there's a story there, but it's okay. Jordan, have you, other than the Ariana Grande encounter, have you had any nice traveling stories with people that you didn't know or kind of met along the way?
Yeah, so I haven't been to a lot of places. I haven't been out of North America before, other than, I live in Australia now, but before I moved, I've only been to the US or other places in Canada. The trips that I was alone. So one trip that I actually really liked was Arizona. I was in Arizona for a course actually, and just kind of meeting people through the course and hanging out with them. It was like a 6 day course. Yeah, a 6 day course. So spending time with them. And I was in Arizona. I didn't rent a car or anything like that. I stayed in a hotel that was pretty close by. So I think like I really liked how you said like tips or how you mentioned the tips for talking to people and whatnot, because there's also, I think, a difference between like coming out of your comfort zone and then being safe. You know what I mean? Like you can be safe and all of that, but then I think you should also be able to be comfortable around people and experience things and whatnot. So I really liked Arizona and meeting people there every morning, like, or not every morning, a couple mornings we went to like a canyon and like went on a hike or whatnot. Cause I went in the summer, which is a bad idea because it's 40 plus degrees in Phoenix, Arizona in the summertime. So yeah, we had to go like 4:30 a.m. because it was like 30 degrees then, and it was a lot more tolerable. Still hot, but more tolerable than 40 plus. So just things like that. And when you're in LA or when I'm in California, there was a person that I met. Me being like someone who likes to do CrossFit, any place that I go, I like to go to a CrossFit box at least once. And I find that's a good way for me to meet people. And when I was in Venice, I went to a CrossFit box there and I met a group of people that took me around like the Venice boardwalk and showed me like a few places to eat around there, a few like not alleyways, but streets that I probably wouldn't have gone down normally. And like in the back, there was like a cool little restaurant where like you could get food that you never got before. And me being vegan too, I mean, in LA, it's so easy to be vegan, probably one of the easiest places around the world. But yeah, that also, it was also kind of good to learn there. So yeah, I like that. I think I really like to kind of immerse myself in the culture and try to talk to as much people as possible. I'm also the type of person that some days like I'm moody and I'm like, don't fucking talk to me. Um,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
but for the most part, yeah, I like that. So that was cool there. Do you have any trips planned for the future? I mean, now with COVID and
Oh,
all, probably
COVID.
nothing super
Yeah.
super close.
Um, I don't. I was considering, I imagine travel restrictions will differ based on where your listener is right now.
Yeah.
I know that in Canada,
Hmm.
we are welcome to a number of other countries right now.
Okay.
And we are, at this point in time, this might change later.
Yeah.
Right now, in August of 2020, we as Canadians are welcome to travel in between each other's provinces.
Hmm.
Um, I I wanted to do a trip. I consulted with my social distancing bubble,
Hmm.
and they very nicely said, "We don't love you being on a plane right now.
Yeah.
Can you hold off on
Yeah.
travel for now?" I said, "Sure."
Yeah.
I think what travel I'd like to do is I'd like to take maybe 2 to 3 weeks off at the end of 2021.
Hmm.
I will be done my master's degree if all goes well in August 2021.
Yeah.
I would like to either do some kind of combination of Australia and New Zealand.
Right.
I'm
Okay.
sure you'll have some tips for me then,
Yeah.
or some kind of combination of African countries,
Okay.
perhaps Kenya and
Yeah.
Tanzania.
Yeah.
These are places I've wanted to go to for
Hmm.
a long time.
Okay.
So whenever we're all as a global as a species, feeling ready and safe
Yeah.
to travel again, I'm all
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Even I guess within, like you said, within like the country, like traveling from province to province is hard. I know here in Australia, like I planned, if all was normal and COVID free, I would have been like at Melbourne by now. I would have been in Sydney, and I would have seen other places in Australia. But of course, none of that happened. So it's yeah, it's a weird time. It's a very weird time.
It's a weird time.
Yeah. Do you see kind of this whole pandemic changing, I guess, your travel plans in the future, like how you go about things?
Yeah, I think there are definitely some things that it will and won't change for me personally.
Right.
There are some components of my travel that I don't think it will change. I do think I will fly on an airplane again. I do
Yeah.
think I'm ready. I think humans are social beings and we're hardwired that way. And
Yeah.
social interaction is largely good for us. So I do want to hang out in a bar again. I do want
Yeah.
to hike through a new city again and do that.
Yeah.
So I don't think for me, as a young and healthy person, I will stop traveling
Right.
um, after COVID is quote unquote over.
Yeah.
Um, there are some travel behaviors I think will change.
Right.
I have no problem wearing a mask. Some people
Yeah.
hate it.
I know.
Everyone
My dad.
has that sibling or parent or friend who they hate it. Like you can see them slowly pulling it off their face and
Yeah.
they're worried about how it makes them look and they can't stand it. I don't mind it.
Uh-huh.
I don't mind it. I
Yeah.
just got like a fashionable one the other day.
Yeah.
I still pick out my outfit every
Yeah.
day. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
I have no problem wearing a mask in a congested airport or on an airplane. If
Yeah.
that's what makes other people feel comfortable, I don't mind at all.
Yeah. And like
Um,
like it's going to be more and more common. Like more and more
yeah.
companies are coming out with masks. It's going to I think it's going to be like a fashion statement too in the future, people. So like don't be afraid to be wearing masks. And I got actually an email the other day about the transit in BC actually is now requiring people as of like I think the 25th of August is requiring people to wear masks on transit
Mhm.
all time. So it's going to be the new norm, I think, and it's definitely something that people struggle with. And I mean, I think it's also different because I haven't worn a mask here in South Australia because technically we haven't needed to. The cases here in South Australia, knock on wood, have been relatively good, and our restrictions were never bad. I know I'm probably making a lot of people jealous, but that's the reality of it. Other places in Australia, like Melbourne right now, is in stage 4 lockdown. So my heart goes out to you guys right now. Not really, but yeah, yeah, that's a weird thing to me. But anything else that
Yeah.
you would do? Yeah,
Things I don't mind not doing again. Physical touch is not one of my love languages.
yeah,
I don't feel the need to give people long-winded hugs or
uh-huh.
even to always shake people's hand.
Yeah,
So I don't think I mind, a bow or a head nod
yeah,
or your hands or another physical indicator of respect or acknowledgement without getting in people's space.
yeah,
So I wouldn't even mind not doing that on my next trip.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we will. I'm definitely interested to see how all of our behavior um, ch- changes over the next few years and
Yeah.
what behaviors stick around.
It'll be interesting for sure. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I thank you for being on here. It was a little over an hour, so hopefully I didn't take too much of your time, but
No,
thank
this
you
is cool.
for being on here. But for everybody listening, where can people find you? Like social media? I know I'll post everything in the show notes, but is there anything that you want to plug in?
Sure. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, my handle is at Roshan D Sahu. So at ROSHANDSAHU. And I think my Flickr, which is just like a public website with all my pictures on it, I think that's much more interesting. So we can post that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, definitely like his Flickr. I looked at it like last night and I like looked through most of the pictures and they were really good pictures, everyone. So definitely check that out. I'll post that all in the show notes. But yeah, thank you again, Roshan, for being on.
Well, thanks
Um,
so much for having me on, Jordan.
yeah, awesome. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I will post all of Roshan's social media and Flickr below in the show notes, so be sure to check all of that out, and I will talk to you all next week.